The general manager of any sports team is one of the most difficult positions in sports, not just because you're the one responsible for shaping the roster and making sure that all the salaries match up with whatever salary cap you have to deal with. The GM also has to deal with the ever-changing opinions of fan bases, as they can go from brilliant architect one day to an irresponsible idiot the next. While no GM is perfect, many get run over the coals a bit unfairly. Joe Sakic is exactly one of those guys, and while he's riding a bit of a wave of positivity from the Matt Duchene trade, it's actually been pretty apparent he knows what he's doing for a while. I'm Kevin of the Burgundy Brigade, and here's why Joe Sakic has already proven himself. We'll start with an honorable mention to the drafts, as Joe Sakic is relying heavily on a scouting staff for this one. True, at the end of the day, his name is still the one on the top of the ledger, but the draft is a massive team effort. But it can't be understated exactly how much better they've been in recent years. Number 1. Righting some wrongs. Now, yes, Joe Sakic has made some mistakes. Nobody's perfect, least of all people learning front office positions on the fly. Additions the likes of Brad Stewart, Reto Berra, and Francois Beauchemin all looked questionable at best when they happened, and downright awful by the end. Now, while it would be better to not have to fix the mistakes that were made, and believe me, Avs fans loved and still love to punish Sakic for these mistakes, isn't it better to have somebody in there that is willing to address the mistake and get it out of there instead of allowing the problem to fester and grow regardless of how obvious it is that they shouldn't be left in there? Why, hello, John Elway. How did you get into this video? Moving on, Brad Stewart and Francois Beauchemin were both eventually bought out, which is never great because you still owe the players money, but both situations were incredibly clear cases of addition by subtraction. The buyout was a bit less painful with Brad Stewart, as Sakic managed to recuperate all the draft picks they had sent away for him in the second part of the Ryan O'Reilly deal. Sakic also managed to send Reto Berra off to the Florida Panthers in a one-for-one deal that brought the Avs Rocco Grimaldi. Now, Grimaldi isn't a regular roster player on the Avs, but he is a reliable depth player, able to come up to the big club when he is needed and play a solid game. Yes, mistakes were made in each of these situations, but each one of these mistakes were recognized, acknowledged, and taken care of. The only one that he didn't manage to really fix, other than just getting him the hell out of town, was Beauchemin, and the money the Avalanche still had to pay him isn't preventative in any way, shape, or form for the team, and is off the books at the end of this season anyways. All in all, these mistakes were handled pretty well. Number 2. He's made a few other pretty good deals. Now, it isn't just Ryan O'Reilly and Matt Duchene that the Avalanche have traded, and yes, not all of them have been gold, but Sakic has done a good job with a few other moves that people rarely talk about. The Avalanche have had some pretty iffy rosters, and yet Sakic has managed to move some players for some interesting pieces in return. Outside of Reto Berra for Rocco Grimaldi, Sakic managed to unload Nick Holden to the New York Rangers for a 4th-round pick. That pick later turned into Peter Kovacha. Holden has done mostly nothing since going to the Rangers, and the fact that Sakic managed to get anything for him was a job pretty well done. Cody McLeod was another deal Sakic pulled off that was a positive surprise. And there's a lot of people in Denver that still love Cody McLeod, and understandably so. He was a big character player that did the thankless job of fighting every night, but his usefulness in the new NHL was pretty clearly up. Sakic managed to trade him to Nashville for Felix Girard. Now, Girard hasn't really done much for the Avs in the system, but freeing up a roster spot that was held by Cody McLeod was a good thing. Another thing about this was that Sakic did right by McLeod and asked him if he wanted to be dealt when he received the call. That certainly isn't something that Sakic had to do by any stretch, and don't think that other players don't notice that. Sean Matthias was another great get from Sakic. He was acquired for a 4th-round pick and Colin Smith, a prospect from previous regimes that the Avs pretty much had given up on. Matthias contributed positively to what was ultimately a doomed push for the playoffs. The only downside from that was the Avs didn't manage to re-sign him in the offseason, but that was more because he wanted to go back to Canada more than anything else. Perhaps the best of these littler moves that happened was at last year's trade deadline, when the Avalanche acquired Sven Andrighetto straight up for Andreas Martinson. Martinson has struggled to be more than a healthy scratch in Montreal, whereas Andrighetto has been irregular in the Avalanche lineup. This is one of those deals where you felt like you were playing poker, obviously flopped the best hand, had the other player move all in, and you had your chips in the middle of the table before they did. Easy call, easy win. Good move, Joe. Number 3, the whole Ryan O'Reilly weekend. far too many people look at the Ryan O'Reilly trade as a silly thing the Avalanche did and are really doing their best to stick to that story. But let's go ahead and take a look at everything that occurred that weekend. The thing that most people look at is the deal itself, and why wouldn't you? It's not like there's any type of extension of a big deal like this that ever comes by and continues to play out for years after the fact. Eric Lindros, who let you in here? Anywho, the deal itself was Ryan O'Reilly and Jamie McGinn to Buffalo for Nikita Zadorov, JT Compher, Mikhail Grigorenko, and a second-round pick. In and of itself, the initial deal has worked out pretty well, decently for the Avalanche and the Sabres alike. But this isn't the only thing that the Avs did that weekend. Knowing that O'Reilly was about to go packing, the Avs picked up the negotiating rights for Carl Soderberg for fifth-round pick. He was then signed to a 5-year deal for much less money than O'Reilly signed for, and has played really good hockey for the Colorado Avalanche ever since. Yes, he had a rough 2016-17 season, but please, that year was freaking insanity for the entire franchise. It was like being forced to watch How I Met Your Mother meets 1 Hour Photo meets He's Just Not That Into You meets Manos the Hands of Fate, shout out MST3K nerds. It was just such a huge combination of terrible and horridness that it makes you not only question your choice to watch it, but your own will to live. Realistically, Soderberg has been a solid hockey player for the majority of his time in Denver. Anyways, back to the deal. Then, the Avalanche flipped the second-round pick to San Jose for San Jose's second in that draft, and the 2 picks mentioned above, Colorado's 2016 second and 2017 sixth. These resulted in A.J. Greer, Cam Morrison, and Dennis Smirnov, respectively. At the end of that weekend, the Avalanche had done far more than just trade away Ryan O'Reilly. They'd set themselves up pretty well for the future, and frankly, it's about time that more people acknowledge that. Number 4, the waiver wires. Now, waiver pickups don't always work out, and they certainly all haven't been gold here either, but Joe Sakic has managed to pick up a few pretty good ones of late. Basically explained, the NHL waiver wire is used when teams are attempting to send certain players down to the minor leagues. If a player is either a certain age or has played a certain amount of NHL games, they have to pass through the waivers, where every other team in the NHL gets a crack at this player for the next 24 hours. If a team submits a claim on a player and has the highest priority, they get him without having to give up anything. There's some more complicated rules that go with this, but we're not going to go into it too much because we don't want to ruin something by looking way too closely at it. Why, hello, Offsides Goal Reviews. What did you get in here for? Anyways, over the past couple of seasons, the Avalanche have picked up Matt Nieto, Mark Barberio, and most recently, Patrick Nemeth off of waivers. Barberio has had a few in-game issues, but for the most part has been solid. Nieto fills out the third line for the Avs fantastically, and Nemeth seems to be the partner that Tyson Barrie has been dreaming of. Waivers can be a bit of a gamble, as one team is essentially saying that this player isn't an NHL player, but there are more than a few times where it's more of a situation of just not having room on the roster anymore. And if you can find those situations, it can work out for you. Finding 3 such situations in a little bit more than a year is pretty darn impressive. That's our list. Did we leave anything out? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our various social media platforms. I'm Kevin from the Burgundy Brigade. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.